Bryn Turnbull is the best-selling author of The Woman Before Wallis, equipped with a Master's of Letters in Creative Writing from the University of St. Andrews, a Master's of Professional Communication from Ryerson University, and a bachelor's degree in English Literature from McGill University. Bryn focuses on finding stories of women lost within the cracks of the historical record, and she also lives in Toronto. Sarah Penner is the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of The Lost Apothecary, which will be translated into 40 languages worldwide and is set to be turned into a drama series by Fox. A graduate of the University of Kansas, Sarah spent 13 years in corporate finance and now writes full-time. She and her husband live in St. Petersburg, Florida, with their miniature dachshund, Zoe. To learn more, visit www.sarahpenner.com. Kate Quinn is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of historical fiction. A native of Southern California, she attended Boston University, where she earned bachelor's and master's degrees in classical voice. A lifelong history buff, she has written 4 novels in the Empress of Rome saga and 2 books set in the Italian Renaissance before turning to the 20th century with The Alice Network, The Huntress, and The Rose Code. All have been translated into multiple languages. She and her husband now live in California with 2 Black rescue dogs. Born in India and raised in the US since she was 9, Alka Joshi has a BA from Stanford University and an MFA from California College of Arts. Joshi's debut novel, The Henna Artist, immediately became an NYT bestseller, a Reese Witherspoon book club pick, was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and is in development as a TV series. Her second novel, The Secret Keeper of Jupur, will be followed by a third in 2023. And I'm now going to pass it off to these lovely ladies to get things started for us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. And thank you to RJ, Julia, and all the other bookkeepers or booksellers who are here sponsoring this. This is really amazing. And I wish that I had an hour with each of your gorgeous novels to talk to you about it, but we're going to turn it over to the Q&A after about a half hour. Bryn, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what your novel is about?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Alka, Kate, and Sarah for all being here. This is just the most exciting evening ever. So my book that just came out, my second book, it's called The Last Grand Duchess. It is about the fall of the Romanov dynasty as told through the eyes of Olga, the eldest daughter of Nicholas and Alexandra. So it follows it looks at both before and after Nicholas's abdication, as well as Olga's personal life, as she struggles to choose between love, duty, and family.
Perfect. All right, Sarah, you're next.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Bryn, huge congratulations to you. I'm sure this is a very special week for you. And I know that Alka, Kate, and I all agree that we're very thrilled to help cheer you on. So I am the author of The Lost Apothecary, which has been out for almost a year now, and it actually comes out in paperback in 12 days, so not too far from now. And The Lost Apothecary is about a female apothecary poisoner who sells well-disguised poison to women seeking vengeance on the men who wronged them. And 200 years later, in present-day London, a woman finds a small, mysterious vial in the River Thames and suspects that she has identified the culprit in the never-solved apothecary murders. So a little bit of historical fiction, there's some magical realism, definitely mystery, sleuthing, thriller, suspense. It's got a little bit of something for everyone.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. And Kate, you're up next. Tell us a little bit about The Diamond Eye.
Well, The Diamond Eye is coming out on March 29th. It is my next book after The Rose Code. And well, I really find the best way to describe it is a Twitter discussion that came up not long ago, which asked writers to describe what is your book about and then what is it really about? So I can say The Diamond Eye is about, it's a World War II drama about the woman who became not only the most effective female sniper in World War II, but the most effective female sniper of all time. What is it really about? It is also really about, at the same time, how women internalize ungodly amounts of swallowed rage and ungodly amounts of levels of perfectionism to achieve dazzling professional success at the cost of crippling emotional problems underneath the surface. So there you go.
And no one does that better than you, Kate.
I heard somebody describe it as the story of what happens when men keep interrupting a woman who's trying to just write her goddamn thing.
You're so right. So, Bryn, you have followed up one fabulous historical novel, The Woman Before Wallis, with another meticulously researched novel, The Last Grand Duchess. What inspired you to write historical fiction?
You know, historical fiction, it was always the genre that I gravitated towards as a reader. And, you know, it was always something that I wanted to get into, but I always kind of figured that it would be something that I do later in life. That, you know, writing was not for me until I came across the story of Thelma Furness. And what made me gravitate towards her story in particular was the notion that this was a woman who had been she'd been peripheral to one of the greatest events in the 20th century, being the abdication, and yet her story had never been told on its own merits. And I think with Olga Nikolaevna, eldest daughter of Nicholas and Alexandra, she's in a similar situation. You know, the fall of the Romanovs, it was arguably one of the biggest events in European history, if not world history. And yet we don't know Olga's story on its own merits. We know about her as one of four. We know about her as one of the Otma sisters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, or we know about her as this sheltered Grand Duchess whose parents had a relationship, had this mystical, sinister relationship with Rasputin. And so for me, it was who's this young woman? How do we pull her story out of the limelight, or out into the limelight? And when I started looking into it, I was amazed at what I found. You know, Olga was she was politically aware. She was incredibly aware of what was happening in her country. She was a Red Cross nurse who assisted in amputations of First World War soldiers. And so here's this dynamic young woman. And I just felt so privileged to be able to tell her story, the story of her standing alone.
Well, you know, I think this is interesting about historical fiction. How do we choose our subjects? Kate, tell us a little bit about how you chose the female Russian sniper as a subject for your novel.
Well, she came about when I was, researching the Night Witches, which is the all-female Russian bomber pilot regiment that was flying against Hitler's Eastern Front in World War II, and which I was researching for my novel, The Huntress. And I was suddenly coming across all these other Russian women war heroes. And that was really something new to me because, as I found out, the Soviet Union was the only allied nation to put women actively in combat, not as partisan fighters, not as spies. And I'm not saying that that's not real fighting, it certainly was, but officially in combat as part of their army, as part of their Air Force. So suddenly I was running across all of these women when you're looking at other allied women, you're finding tales of the home front or, spy stories. But for Russian women, I was suddenly finding women who were tank drivers, women who were bomber pilots, who were fighter pilots, and women who were snipers. And the most famous of those was Ludmilla Pablochenko. And she earned the nickname Lady Death, which I thought was just like the most hair-raising thing I'd ever found in my life. But the thing that really, fascinated me even more was the fact of how relatable she was, because she wrote her memoirs later in life. And when I delved into those, I realized you have a certain image of a woman sniper. You think it's going to be some cold, icy Russian blonde, with her ice-colored eyes, pity it all, that kind of thing. And instead, I found this woman who was a single mother, a graduate student, an aspiring historian, which is definitely something I can relate to. And, this woman whose only ambition in life was, to finish her dissertation and provide a life for her young son, and who had this deeply relatable nerdiness about her. She was a bookworm. She talked books. She had all of these deeply relatable things about her, despite the fact that she had this fearsome reputation. So that really was what drew me to her, was not only the fact that she, had a tally of 309 and got to be best friends with Eleanor Roosevelt when she came to the United States on a goodwill tour, but the fact that she was also a woman that we can imagine being friends with, a woman we can imagine knowing and liking. And that really is one of the wonderful things about historical fiction, is that you can look at people in the past who you might think live such different lives from us. And then you actually realize the commonalities, the things that draw us together, like the fact that this woman, is trying to be a good mom and trying to be a good student and trying to, figure out a way to provide a life for herself and her family, and is still dealing with an ex-husband who just will not leave her alone. And all of these things are things that we can relate to. And that's what I love to find is in historical fiction, is when you find someone who you want to write about because they gobsmack you, but then they become personal to you, and they become someone that you feel like you could know and who you could run into any day.
What's interesting is you and Bryn are both writing about Russia, and at the same time, but such different books. And I think this is that kind of spontaneous combustion that happens sometimes. What fascinated both of you about Russia?
I'll let Bryn go to that one first, because you're talking Imperial Russia and I'm talking Soviet Russia. And oh my goodness, different times, definitely.
Completely two sides of a coin, absolutely. For me, the thing that really fascinated me about Imperial Russia, it's such a snapshot of a moment in time that, first of all, is never going to come back, but also just the opulence of it, and the grandeur of Imperial Russia. It's something that you see, and it's like a dream almost when you look at it, and when you just kind of picture what was happening in the lives of these people who not only were living at the very top of the system, but also who were living at the very bottom of it. Yeah. And so there's a very logical and very inevitable thoroughfare between the women in my book and the women in Kate's book, who are, where you see how that progression goes. Once you've had this opulence, what's going to follow? What's going to rise from the ashes of that?
Right.
Well, and it really comes down to one of the Russian emblems is the phoenix, rising from the ashes. And the thing that I find fascinating about Russia is that, it's such a huge country that it has one of everything. It is so massive that you can't say that there is one part of Russia that is the definitive Russian experience. Ludmilla Pablochenko was Ukrainian, which was part of Russia at the time. It is not part of Russia anymore, but Ukraine has its own history. It's bound up with the Soviet Union in some very ugly ways, unfortunately. But the thing I find, if you can find anything about the Soviet Union or about Russia, any that you could call a national character, is that there is a sense of mysticism that pervades through the history, because things are slow to change in a country that large, which means that there's folklore that persisted into the 20th century, which is still in some ways alive in a way that in smaller countries got stamped out much faster by the Industrial Revolution. And it also means too that there's also a thing where when you have a country that large, you're not necessarily defeating only the people. If you're invading it, you have to defeat the country itself, and you can't. It's too large, it's too cold, it is too much its own thing. And really the thing that amazed me about World War II is that how there was this callback where Napoleon almost happened yesterday in the national consciousness of Russia, where there was still this thing where everyone sort of looked at Hitler and it's like, we're just going to let the winter and the land defeat you, because that worked for Napoleon. It's going to work for you. And it
wasn't working. Now, speaking of mysticism, Sarah, you're writing about a female apothecary of poisons, and I do not ever want to eat at your house. So
don't touch the eggs.
Yeah, right. It's funny. As soon as Kate said the word mysticism, I immediately, think of kind of what inspired me to write historical fiction. And like Bryn said, I began as a reader of historical fiction. I think many of us writers do. And one of the earliest authors that I read and fell in love with is Philippa Gregory. And she's most well known for her stories about the Boleyn sisters. And there was always something so enchanting and kind of fairy tale magical to me about her stories. And something that's different about the Lost Apothecary versus the other books we've been talking about is there are no real life characters in the Lost Apothecary. All of the characters are fictional, but what brought me to the story was very much a sense of place. And that first sense of place that I had in my mind was this little apothecary shop at the very back of a hidden alleyway in central London, kind of, hidden between buildings, behind a trick door. And so that was really what propelled me into the story. Now it helps that I think someone mentioned earlier on my bio that I used to work in finance, and I had the opportunity to travel to London many times. And every time I went, I was just awestruck by, these pubs that are 300 years old, or these brick alleyways that look like I went and saw like all these Roman, remains. And it's just amazing to me that you can literally step into history in so many of these beautiful places throughout the world. So my entry point into writing historical fiction was not necessarily a real life figure, but instead the sense of place and evoking that for readers in a way that other historical fiction authors have done for me.
Especially humbling as an American when you go to another country, like Europe, like India, which is so much older than ours. And you think like, there are manhole covers here that are older than my entire nation.
Yeah. Exactly.
Many times. I studied in Scotland, and I would pass buildings every day and be like, okay, this is older than Canada.
Yeah.
I know, I am loath to tell people that my house that I live in now is 110 years old, because to Europeans, it makes no difference at all. They're like, oh, that's a new house.
Yep.
Okay, so what do each of you hope? And, I know that all of us historical fiction authors, really what we're writing about are women who got lost in history. We want to bring their stories to light. And so what do each of you hope your readers are going to take away from your novels? The Last Grand Duchess, The Diamond Eye, The Lost Apothecary. By the way, all fabulous names.
Yeah, no.
Bryn, you want to get us started?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've all got good names. They're all like, and Secret Keeper of Jaipur, Hannah Artist, same thing. Just like meaty names. They're so good. So in terms of what I want people to take away from The Last Grand Duchess, the thing that I always found every time I've read about the Romanovs, whether fiction or nonfiction, there so many times they're either viewed as tyrants or as victims. There's always a lens through which they're portrayed, and to me the truth of them lies somewhere in the middle. But the truth of the Romanovs lies most fundamentally in the fact that they were a family, and the family bond that they have through all of the the diaries that they kept, the journals that they wrote, the accounts of their contemporaries, retainers at court. The thing that for me always struck home was this is a family first and foremost. And if you take away the trappings of the office, if you take away the splendid palaces and the gilt and the glamour and the diamonds, you're left with this wonderfully close knit family unit, and a family with virtues and flaws just like any other. And so for me, that was the most important thing. I'm not writing about the martyrdom of the Romanovs necessarily. I'm not writing about the fact that they I'm writing about all of these aspects of them, the fact that they were complicit in this corrupt system, but they were a family, and they were a family that loved and played pranks on each other and took silly photos, and that to me was just so important and so special.
What would have happened if their hemophiliac son had died?
Well, that's the big mystery about the Romanovs, because so after Catherine the Great, her son, who hated Catherine, changed the laws of succession, and so women were not allowed to take on the rule of Russia, and that was the big issue for the Romanovs, or for the last Romanovs rather, because they had these 4 intelligent, dynamic, wonderful daughters, and none of them were eligible for the line of succession. So at one point, when it was clear that Alexei's hemophilia was a serious problem and that he might not reach adulthood, Nicholas looked into having the law changed so that Olga would be able to succeed if Alexei died. And that kind of didn't go anywhere because the law had been so kind of just cemented into Russian law that they couldn't actually change it. So what would have happened? Who knows? Maybe they would have gotten around to it. Maybe Olga would have ended up taking over. But it's one of those what if moments of history.
Wow.
I would like to see now you write the alternative history where Olga becomes Tsarina and heads off the Russian Revolution with her wives and
exactly.
wise and well considered as rulership after her father, who was, let's face it, a little bit of a moron in some ways, the way he handled things.
Yeah. He was a soft dog, as people have told me about my dachshund. He's a soft dog. Yeah, I wanted the Romanov rulers to be a lot stronger. It was the mother who was so strong, and she was driving me nuts as I was reading this, because I just wanted her to push her out of the way and say, do you realize that this entire empire is going down because of you and what you are imagining? So Sarah, what would you like to tell us about what you hope for your readers? What are they going to take away from The Lost Apothecary?
Yeah, so The Lost Apothecary, for those of you who haven't read it, it's dual timeline. So we see a woman in present day London, and then we see two women. One is an adolescent girl, and then an aging grown woman in the historical timeline. And what was so not only challenging, but also really fulfilling as I wrote both timelines, and kind of thought about the struggles that all three of these characters were going through, is that no matter where we're from, when we live, what we're experiencing, we, especially as women, are really not that different from one another. We all want the same things. We want validation. We want safety. We want the ability to make our own money or have our own things that we're proud of. We want the ability to be free and independent. And that was something that I was able to explore in writing this story, and very much something that I hope women and men who read the book kind of take away, that, even though we see 200 years separating these characters, there are very similar struggles and just core intrinsic desires that we all have. And the people who come 200 years from now, when we're all long gone, they're going to be the same. It's the human experience.
Yeah.
And the other piece that I would like readers to take away, particularly when we look at the adolescent girl, her name is Eliza, and then Nella, the apothecary, they both live in 1791. They could not be more different. Eliza's very naive and spunky. Nella is very vengeful and aggrieved. And yet they kind of, by the end of the story, have taught each other so much and saved each other in some ways. And I think it's an opportunity for us all to kind of look at the people in our own life, especially maybe people that we think, oh, I have nothing in common with them. I can't relate to them. Why would I reach out to them? There may actually be more similarities there than you might think. And I think whether the person has a different life experience, they're older, they're younger, what have you, we can all learn a little bit from everybody. So those are a couple of the things that I hope readers take away.
Yeah. And I think in the Diamond Eye, same thing with Mila. I think Mila is really teaching us that you should go for what you want to do, and you can make it happen, and you can do it and still be a loving person to your family. You can be a sniper and still have a heart.
Yeah, so that was the thing that really was the challenge about this book, was that, how is it that I can make a woman like this, who was, a Soviet woman who, she was a hard believer in communism and in, Stalin, even though we know these things did not fundamentally bring good to their country, but she was a believer in these things. This was her time. And she also was someone, who frankly has a longer tally list than anybody except maybe Sarah's apothecary. And she has all of these things. How can I make her understandable and sympathetic to a modern day audience? And it really is looking, again, as Sarah said, for these commonalities between experiences, that we want similar things, and that we want we have things that we want, things that we aim for. And the thing I really ended up finding for Mila is that, it's the fact that women tend to be very hard on themselves. Yeah. And we hold ourselves to immensely high standards. Most of the women I know are like this to some degree. So the thing that I really ended up trying to, hopefully that readers will pull away from Mila's story is the idea that, you can go for what you want, but it will not kill you if you fail. You can fail. You can pick yourself back up and try again. You can do this. And, there is not the idea that if you fail once, then that's it. Because that's something that she has to learn in the course of this book. And I would
Yeah.
say too, just in far as historical fiction in general, I think it's so valuable, and it's something I like for anyone to reading historical fiction, not just mine, but Bryn's and Alka's and Sarah's, is that historical fiction is a wonderful way to examine the issues of the present, but through the lens of the past. Because what we're often doing is, if you come up to someone, almost any reader, and say, I want to have a discussion about fill in hot button issue here, most people are going to be like, that sounds like it's going to be a discussion with a lot of yelling, and I think I have something else I'd rather do. Because we're nervous about these discussions, but if we can wrap these hot button issues, the current things that are roiling and dividing us today, in story, it is a way that we can gently back people into a corner a little bit and ask them to consider an issue in the context of a fictional world, in the context of the past, where it's a little less charged than it is when we're looking at it in a modern day headline. Yeah. And that's why I think it's, historical fiction and sci-fi are sort of sister genres. The sci-fi looks at the issues of the present through a lens of the future. And historical fiction uses the past, but both rely on world building, and both are very much, we're talking about the issues of today. It's just that we're using stories of the past to do it.
That's a really good analogy. I like that distinction between the science fiction and between historical fiction. I also think that historical fiction allows us to remember the history a little bit more, because, if you think about it, history books are very dry. And I don't know about you, but I was never interested in the battles and the rulers. And, I was just going, put me to sleep. But if I read historical fiction and it has women in it, and I'm interested in what the women were doing at that time, I will remember that history a lot more, like as I will remember all of your fabulous books. So today we are talking about, Kate was just talking, The Diamond Eye, Sarah's The Lost Apothecary, and Bryn, hold up your fabulous book, because I only have the version right before it. Yes, fabulous. Last Grand Duchess, The Last Grand Duchess, fabulous books. So lightning round, each of us, please tell us what is something your readers don't know about you. What is like some kind of a surprise? Sarah, you kick it off.
Oh, of course, I'm going first. Okay, something that a lot of people don't know about me is, for basically half my life, I have loved to cook. I cook most nights of the week, like from scratch dinner. I love it.
Okay, Bryn.
I'm a licensed bartender. I refinish furniture in my spare time, and I have got an encyclopedic knowledge for song lyrics. Like, if you're ever at karaoke, I'm your girl.
You will remember song lyrics. Like if you've ever heard the song before, you will remember them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Once and it's like, boom, it's in the vault.
Oh my gosh. All right, Kate, what is surprising about you?
Well, before I decided to become a novelist, I trained as an opera singer. So I still sing along with opera in the car. I sing along with musicals as well. And I absolutely can get through every single one of those fast flows on Angelica Schuyler's Satisfied if I'm singing along in the car.
Wow.
Oh my God.
You'll have her to your karaoke. She's the one.
Oh my God, you guys are amazing. And let's see, what about me? Okay. So I always thought I would be an artist. I always thought I would draw. I thought I would be drawing New Yorker cartoons. And maybe now that I'm a full-time author, I'm going to get a chance. So I'm going to send in my New Yorker cartoons finally to the New Yorker. And they're all about my dogs, because dogs are funny and they teach us so much. So that's about me. Now we're going to hopefully open it up to Q&A, and I wanted to invite Victoria back from RJ Julia. And I think that she is going to moderate the question and answer. So you guys, if you have questions, please put them in the chat function, and Victoria will find them and read them off.
Yes. So we have a lot of questions coming in, so we will jump right in. Let's see. Let's start with, so these are questions for everyone. How do you pick a story idea from your running list of stories? And is it difficult to narrow it down and focus on one idea if you have multiple people or topics you want to write about?
I can start off
first.
if you'd like.
Sure, I'll start. For me, it's the character comes and sits in my head and literally will sit there and go, I'm not leaving.
Wow.
Start writing. I'm not leaving until you write the book. And then for the competing ideas, yeah, it's absolutely impossible because at some point another character comes into the other side of your brain and goes, yeah, but in this one you get to kill somebody. You go, ah. Yeah.
And have you ever noticed that character always turns up when like you're in the editing trenches and you're really hating your book? Like that's when the new character comes up and dangles the shiny idea in front of you.
Oh,
Yeah, every time.
I wish that would happen. I like that idea. Sarah, does that happen to you?
So I wish I was like so many authors that had like this Google document with all of these great ideas, and it's just a matter of time to get to it. My second book, my sophomore novel, which has not yet been announced, the idea came to me when I was having a glass of wine in like a period of 30 minutes, like a fully formed story. And I wrote it down as quickly as I could. And then I drafted it in like 11 weeks. And it was not on a Google document. It was not on a list. So I have to say, for me, it's just kind of like that magic. I mean, in a way, the Lost Apothecary was the same. It wasn't queued up for writing someday. It just sort of came to me. So, and I don't know what my third book will be, and I'll just have to wait until that one decides to pop in. So I'm a little different in that way, I guess.
I tend to have it where, you know, I do keep a file. I'd literally just call the plot possibilities file, where I stash, you know, little 2-sentence ideas if they occur to me in the shower or while I'm driving, or, you know, I stash links in there if I read a link of something, an interesting article that, you know, oh, that might make an interesting book someday. And then generally speaking, I mean, something quite often will be grabbing me and say, please write me next, please write me next. But, you know, like whenever you're trying to not just be a writer because of the joy of it, but also because you want to pay the light bill, there's the question of what's going to sell. And so then it becomes a little bit of a discussion with editors and agents and so forth, where you're trying to find that sort of like Venn diagram overlay between like, what is it that you feel passionate enough to write? And what is it that your editor thinks they can sell and will be a nice follow-up to whatever you've already got. So that's sort of always trying to find that, you know, overlap. And, you know, of course, these things change because trends in what people are reading change all the time.
Yeah. So, you know, it took me 10 years to write The Henna Artist, and people keep asking me, so during that time, didn't you want to write about something else? You just kept writing on the same thing. You know what? It never once occurred to me to write something else. It's like it grabbed a hold of me and it would not let go. And then when The Henna Artist went off to the printers, then one of the characters, Malik, said, oh my God, I cannot let this go. You've got to write my story. And then I started writing book number 2. And then I realized that book number 2 doesn't have anything about the third central character from The Henna Artist. And then I have to write book number 3. It's almost like they are propelling me to write the next novel.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. In doing your research, how often do you find first-person accounts or diaries of women living in the historical time and struggling against the social norms of that time?
You certainly can find them. I mean, like they're there. And actually, I was very pleased with the Diamond Eye because for the very first time I had something to work off of where the woman, not only had she really lived, but she wrote her memoirs. And so I actually had her own story in her own words. Although even then, it's like people think that's got to make it super easy, right? But it doesn't, because you never know, people's diaries, the things that they write, they're writing a little bit for posterity maybe. And they're also writing, you're writing your own experiences, but people can be a little blind about their own experiences. So you're not, even when you have words from the horse's mouth, as it were, you cannot entirely take those words at face value. And that's the fun part about interpretation, is because when you have to look at, all right, this is what she's saying is what happened, but I have a different account here and I have a different account here. And what do I really think is going on? And so it's always going to be an act of interpretation, which is why fiction, even when you're writing off of real historical documents, it's never just a matter of transcribing the past.
It's never a matter of transcribing the past. And it's also the things that we take for granted in our day and age back, 50, 75, 100, 20, 200 years ago, the same people writing took the same things for granted. So, for example, at what point were you able to unplug a phone from one room and plug it into another room in order to take the same call? Things like that, you don't always know. And it's not going to necessarily be written about because that's just something that an individual would take for granted. I also think so much of history, you know, so many of the written accounts of history are written by men. It's written by the victors, and the victors for, you know, millennia have been men. And so the women's stories, I think historical fiction has such an important part to play in bringing those women's stories to life. You know, we're so lucky to be able to work in this genre where we can bring these stories back and really, you know, dig into those experiences of women.
Yeah. You know, when they first told me that my books were going to go into the historical fiction genre at the publishers, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know that was a genre. And so I looked it up and I go, oh, I've been reading all of those books in that genre. Now I get it. Now I see what that's all about. And I agree with you, Bryn. I think it is so important for women's history to read historical fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the importance of firsthand accounts in researching historical fiction cannot be overstated. And that was actually what I immediately reached for, is this firsthand account of an apothecary. Now, with all of the talk about not losing women in history, it almost like proves this point, because this is a male apothecary, but it's his firsthand account, of course, you know, transcribed and edited and what have you, of all of the patients that he saw. And he was late 18th century. All of the patients, what remedy he was dispensing them, what he charged, what his own debts were. There's some really beautiful and poignant moments in here when he saw a lunar eclipse, tragedies that, you know, his patients died, all kinds of really just honest, raw details. I wish that I had found this written by a woman apothecary, but this was the best I could do. So I think when you can find those firsthand accounts, it's the most authentic glimpse you're going to get, because you're not getting someone else's interpretation, like Kate said.
Yep.
Okay. What are your favorite historical TV shows or movies with strong women characters, like in your books?
Oof. Sarah, start us off.
Oh gosh. You know, I do not watch a lot of TV. You know, I watched the first season of Outlander and liked it for reasons that probably a lot of us, especially the women on this call who are tuning in, liked it for. I think Outlander was really entertaining. But I don't watch a whole lot of TV, so I'm probably not the best person to answer pop culture questions.
Okay, I'll go next. And I'm only going to say this because when the producers bought the option for the henna artists, they said this could be like an Indian Downton Abbey. So I'm going to say Downton Abbey because there were some really strong female characters, like the first daughter. I think she was an amazing prickly. She was a little prickly. She wasn't, you know, she knew her mind. She knew what she wanted. And I really like that about her. So I'll say Downton Abbey.
I'm very fond of Peaky Blinders, which is a show about, you know, gangsters in Birmingham post World War I. But for all that it is a show about gangsters that stars, you know, the three brothers in the leads, but it is a show with a huge number of very strong-willed, strong-minded women characters. And these are women who absolutely pass the Bechdel test. They absolutely are not there just to look pretty and, you know, prop up the male characters. They all have their own agendas. And so that's one that I have really enjoyed and that really stands up actually to rewatching.
Go Aunt Polly.
Oh, yes.
Aunt Polly. You know, so my answer is a little bit out of left field because technically it's not historical fiction. Well, actually, technically it is historical fiction, but it's so in the past. The BBC recently did an adaptation of War and Peace. I think it was in 2016, 2017, and it was spectacular. You know, I watched it. I've watched it probably 5 or 6 times over just because it's so beautifully done. And, you know, I watched The Great as well, huzzah. While writing The Last Grand Duchess. I wouldn't say that was particularly historically accurate, but oh my God, it was a rollicking good time.
All right. Love historical fiction. Reason because after reading, I go into the web to research to see what is factual. Do you all go down a rabbit hole like this? And if so, how do you get out?
It's almost impossible.
When your agent or your editor or your friends say, no, you don't need to know this yet, and it hasn't occurred to you that your deadline is approaching. That's how you get out. I have actually started to I've tried to, I mean, we all go down the rabbit hole and we love the rabbit hole or we wouldn't be in historical fiction. But it is very easy sometimes to do this thing where you spend 5 hours researching something that ends up being 2 lines in one paragraph, and that paragraph gets cut in your second draft. And that can be heartbreaking because it's like, damn it, you put all this time in. So I have started, I am not ashamed sometimes of doing the thing of like, putting in parentheses, insert historically accurate banquet menu here and keep going, because maybe later I'll realize I don't need that scene with the banquet, and then I didn't waste the time for it. And or I'll do a verbal end run sometimes. Like actually when I advised a friend who was starting to go down a rabbit hole and be like, I need maps of New York City in 1912, because how can I be sure that my heroine can see this building from where she's standing? And that's where I said, no, you are not going down the rabbit hole finding maps. What you are going to do is say she looked in the direction of that building, and that gets you around the whole need to find the maps. Now just keep going. And she said, you know that you're right, that will do it. So I actually am a big believer in go down that rabbit hole when you need to, but do not do research that you don't have to do, because that is the thing that will kill your time faster than anything when you are a history nerd.
But I think we are all such nerds, you know, and we write historical fiction. It means we are interested in history and facts and things like that. So I think we love rabbit holes. We love going down those rabbit holes. I think for the henna artist, I went down this rabbit hole looking at erotic pocket watches from the Victorian era. And I really got into the whole erotic pocket watch thing. And I was thinking, oh, I might want to get one of these for myself. And I'm like, Alka, stop. You are writing a novel. This is not for you.
And then your Google search history looks really interesting.
Oh my God, yes.
You're getting some weird ads.
I'd love to see targeted Amazon advertising though for erotic pocket watches of the 19th. I mean, really, that's going to be something.
It's so funny. I find when I'm researching, I'll kind of like emerge from the research rabbit hole for, you know, sustenance at some point. Like I'll get a phone call from a friend being like, we literally haven't seen you in 2 weeks. And I'll come out with this sort of glazed, glassy look on my face. And they'll be like, you did it again. You did it again. Get out, get out, get out. Pen. Here's a pen. Here's a pen. Here's a piece of paper. Start writing. Don't look anymore.
Because you've gone into your head, because
because I've gone into the rabbit hole. I've gone into the research rabbit hole and I'm deep diving on something. Okay. And they like pull me out from the computer and I'm kind of like, no, but someone's going to care about that 2-sentence word like thing. And yeah, they're like, you got to give it up at some point. Just keep writing pages.
Yeah, I love Kate's bracket. That's what I use. I do kind of the overarching research in the very beginning, draft the story, use the brackets, and then fill in later. I think that's a really good technique.
Oh. All right. I do it as I go along, you guys. I can't either. Thank you. Oh, good, Bryn. I'm glad to hear
both. But you know, it's hard sometimes to know what you're going to need and what you won't. So you just go down that hole.
I know. I'll dig in.
All right. So kind of a follow-up question to that is, what do you use most for your research? Is it like internet, libraries, specific documents?
Well, I think since the pandemic has been upon us, I tend to use a lot of internet because we couldn't go to libraries. So many of our books have been published during pandemics. And so, I tend to use the internet a lot. But even in the internet, you can go into JSTOR, you can go into all kinds of research documents at universities. And so it feels like you're actually there. But now the internet makes it a lot easier. I don't have to get in my car and go somewhere. Do you guys feel the same way?
Well, yeah, with the Lost Apothecary, there were so many digitized documents. Pharmacopoeia, that's actually a word mentioned in the book. A pharmacopoeia is kind of like this old encyclopedia of drugs and remedies. And there are so many amazing resources that have been digitized by these wonderful archivists and librarians all over the world, where you can go in and see these 16th century, 17th century pharmacopoeias and the types of things that a real life apothecary would have been dispensing. So that couldn't be done without the internet. I mean, you could fly to London, go to the British Library, get in the queue, get the book, sit down with it and spend weeks with it, or you can just bookmark it on your internet and use it for free.
And don't do that. Don't go there, because you guys, you're going to have a COVID test before, you're going to have a COVID test after, you're going to have a COVID test before you start coming back to the United States. Don't do it. I am so sick of COVID tests right now with all the traveling.
Gosh, I was supposed to go to Russia when I was writing The Last Grand Duchess in late 2018. I was all set to go. I was talking to the Canadian embassy about getting there on an arts visa. I'm all raring to go, booking my tickets. And then a little something happened on the way to the drugstore called COVID. And so that put paid to all of the plans, everything. Like I was supposed to go to the Winter Palace and to St. Petersburg. None of that happened. But thank goodness for the internet, and particularly for YouTube. For this book, YouTube was my savior, because so many people they went to Russia, they took videos of the inside of the Winter Palace, of, the Alexander Palace, and posted their travel logs online. And I honestly could not have written this book without people posting their travel logs on YouTube. So anybody who's done that, thank you from the bottom of my heart, because that is so much of where The Last Grand Duchess's scenery comes from.
I found that, again, a lot of it, has been so good online, because it's not even just like being able to Google things. There's so much more online now. It's not just with digitization of letters and things like that. I found all of Eleanor Roosevelt's My Day columns online, and you could search them by name.
Are those yours, Kate?
Yeah. I would echo the keyword searching is amazing. Well, Kate, I see you're back on, so I'll let you keep going.
You think they know what an Instacart delivery is by now. But the thing I really found, it's things like, all those people who upload vintage menus onto like Pinterest. My God, you people saved my life. Now I finally can figure out how much does a cup of coffee cost in a diner in DC and 50. Or just things like Google Maps is wonderful, because I had a whole chase through Washington, DC to plan, and I wasn't able to go to DC and walk it. So I am literally like plotting on Google Maps. It's like, how far is the Russian embassy from Rock Creek Park? Right. And then I'm finding guidebooks to try to tell me about parks, so because I have a sniper duel to plan in one, which does lead to some very funny exclamations from my study when I'm saying things like, because you find those travel bloggers who are talking about their times in parks and so forth and traveling and, visiting. And there I am snarling, like, I don't want to hear about how you reconnected to your sense of spirituality by your hike through Rock Creek Park and your visit to Boulder Bridge. Can you please just tell me if this creek is deep enough to sink a body in? Which is, again, the kind of thing that, does lead to some very interesting Google search results.
And in addition to menus, one thing that I always look at are Vogue magazines and, magazine, Good Housekeeping, anything from a certain era. So in book number 3, I'm writing about Paris in 1974. So I had to look at fashions in 1974. What are the women in Paris wearing? Because it's going to be different from what they're wearing in the United States in 1974. And that was so much fun. I went down that rabbit hole and thought, I need to buy that coat.
That's a good rabbit hole. That's a good one. I actually got a reference book of 1930s women's dresses when I was writing The Woman Before Wallis. And I'm telling you, I'm going to take this book to a tailor one day, to a seamstress, and say, I want page 84, I want page 22, and I want page 203. Go.
All right, so we're going to make this the final question, just because this is one of RJ Julia's favorite questions to ask, and we just had a viewer ask it. So what are the books that you currently have on your nightstand, or books you can't wait to start? It's a tough one. You guys can have a second to think about it.
That's a tough one.
I can start. I am so looking forward to, I have Piper Haguli's novel about Anne Lowe called By Her Own Design. Anne Lowe is the black fashion designer who designed Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress to JFK.
That's a cover.
Yes, and then it's a lovely cover. And then I have Mademoiselle Revolution, about a biracial woman who ends up embroiled in the French Revolution. I'm looking for the name on that because I get so many ARCs in. And then I am looking at also Kate Forsyth's new book and Christina McMorris's new book, and I am drowning in beautiful ARCs right now. So I really can't. I'm just absolutely in heaven.
Ooh.
Something that's on my desk right now is The Prophet's Wife by Libby Grant, also known as Libby Hawker. This is Kate called it an ARC. I call it an ARC. Doesn't really matter, but it's an advanced reader copy. And this is one of the perks of being an author, is we get all of these beautiful advanced copies to read. So this is on my list. And then I'm also reading through NetGalley. I got Lucy Foley's next book, The Paris Apartment. Kind of like my end of day when I just want to lay in bed and kind of lose myself. So I'm reading that, really liking that as well.
Yeah. Let's see. I have Walter Mosley's Blood Grove right now. I'm going to be interviewing him soon, so I'm excited about reading that. And I read this wonderful book called A Net for Small Fishes by Lucy Jago. That's also historical fiction. And that's all about 18th century England. So that was really a lovely book to read.
And I've got, right now I just started an arc of Madeline Martin's The Librarian Spy. She wrote The Last Bookshop in London, which I was absolutely enchanted by. So I am so excited for this book. I'm about 20 pages in and I'm loving it so far. And the other one that I've got coming up in the pipeline is Kristen Beck's The Winter Orphans. That's also an arc right now, but I loved her first book, Courage My Love, about the Italian resistance in the Second World War. And this one promises to be an absolute cracker as well.
Wow.
All right. Well, I want to.
And let's not forget the other 3 books that I read in order to prepare for this. The Last Grand Duchess, Kate Quinn's The Diamond Eye, and of course, Sarah Penner's The Lost Apothecary.
All so beautiful books. I want to thank everyone so much for being here tonight. Thank you, Bryn, Alka, Kate, Sarah. It was such a lovely discussion between you all. Of course, do not forget to purchase a copy of The Last Grand Duchess, as well as The Lost Apothecary, The Diamond Eye, and The Secret Keeper of Juniper. I want to thank you again for all being here, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.